I want to help you save money with alternatives to these 5 overpriced whiskeys. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and today I wanted to talk to you about alternatives to 5 whiskeys that I think are just overpriced at this point. And I don't want to make this video about being negative. I don't want to make this about bashing these bottles, because some of these bottles have a really great history. Some of them have quite the reputation in the past for being really great bottles of whiskey. However, I truly believe that your best friend is going to tell you the most truth. And I want to speak what I think is the truth about the value propositions on these bottles. I don't think that they're worth the money they're asking anymore. And I wanted to give you some alternatives that I thought might fit the bill. Let's get into this list. Number 5 on this list is a bottle I've reviewed in the past. You can check that review out at the end of this video if you haven't seen it already. It is the Macallan A Night on Earth in Scotland. And I've beat up on this bottle a little bit because it was a lot of money for what it is. So this bottle cost me $140 Canadian when it first was released. Now, the price has gone up in British Columbia at the government stores, the cheapest providers of whiskey in the province typically. It's now $235 Canadian before tax. We got 15% tax, $270 Canadian to bring this bottle home. Now, it's cheaper in some other provinces. Looking at you, Alberta, I think it's still about $140 Canadian. But it's just ridiculously overpriced for what it is, which is just style over substance. It's a non-age statement. It's a mix of both ex-bourbon and sherry casks, but it's not the sherry cask profile that we typically expect from Macallan. It's bottled at 43% alcohol, so it's low proof. At least it is natural color, but it's a very plain and simple profile. I feel like they put more thought into the packaging for this whiskey than they did the actual whiskey itself. It comes in a ridiculously oversized, like almost like Russian nesting doll type box that opens one way, opens the other. It has an entire insert that pulls out. I'll try and put a picture up of it because I don't have the box anymore, but it is over the top. You're paying $270 Canadian for basically shortbread cookie with orange zest and a little bit of spice. No thank you. You should be getting a lot more money for your money than that. So what might I suggest as an alternative to this single malt Scotch whiskey? Well, given the flavor profile, the tasting notes I get of like vanilla shortbread cookie, orange zest, and some spice, I want to suggest some Irish. I want to suggest Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength. Now that is a single pot still Irish whiskey. It's non-chill filtered. It's natural color. It's coming to you at cask strength from ex-bourbon and sherry casks, much like this. However, it's just brought to you with such a better presentation. It is an integrity bottling as far as I know, and its flavor profile is tropical fruit, sweet desserts, spice, all those same sort of things that you wanted to get out of this bottle, just with more of it. And you can get it for about $90 Canadian on sale in Alberta. In BC, I think you can get it for about $120 regular price. It might be coming out in the summer spirits release. In Ontario, I believe it just released as well. So you can get your hands on this whiskey. It's a great alternative to Macallan, A Night on Earth in Scotland. And if it's a little too punchy for you, go ahead and just pick up the regular Redbreast 12. Even cheaper, you're still saving a ton of money. I think it's still better for the price performance and just in the glass than this Macallan. Number 4 on this list is a Scotch whiskey that I think might just be the enthusiast community's favorite whipping boy. And they've given us way too many reasons to pile on. They are not doing themselves any favors. This is the whiskey that is 43% alcohol. It is chill filtered and it is colored to death. I am talking about Dalmore 18-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey. Now, Dalmore 18 used to be poorly priced as a whiskey in my market to begin with, at about $300 Canadian, then plus tax. But in the last year and a half, it's gotten even worse. To buy this whiskey, you have to pay $515.99 Canadian before tax. And that's at the government store. Again, the cheapest prices in my province are at the government store. And this price is reflected in Alberta too. This isn't just an isolated thing. So to bring this bottle back home with me would cost me $593 Canadian, nearly $600. Now, I've had a glass of this. I do not own a bottle. I'm not super familiar with it, so I have to say that as a way of hedging this. Maybe it's the most amazing whiskey that I've ever tasted, and I just don't know it yet. But I have had a glass, and I went, it's okay. This is a thin, burnt sugar colorant dosed, silver stag adorned, premiumized Bay Street lifestyle piece attempting to be Macallan. That's what they're trying to do. They said, hey, Macallan can do it. Why can't us? If this is where whiskey is going in the long term, I think I might just drink Armagnac instead. My word, this is brutal. All right, enough negative. Now for the positive. Let's talk alternatives. And these aren't the cheapest alternatives, but these are high quality alternatives in my books. So number one, and again, you might not be able to get these all year round, but hopefully you can get one of these. GlenDronach 18-year-old. When you can find it in my market, it's about $230 Canadian. Now, that's a lot of money, but this has an 18-year age statement, just like the Dalmore 18. That's one of the reasons why I picked it. I was targeting 18-year-olds because, hey, maybe you're wanting that high age statement. It's 46% alcohol, so it's got Dalmore beat there. It's non-chill filtered, got Dalmore beat there, and it's natural color. And the non-chill filter thing has been confirmed by Brown-Forman. Dramface went ahead and did that when it looked like it might not be the case anymore when they removed it off the label. For now, it is still non-chill filtered. It's 100% Oloroso cask matured. And it's got like rich stewed fruits, chocolate. It's nutty because that Oloroso, it's syrupy. And I mean, it's Billy Walker-esque work that's being done by Dr. Rachel Berry. There's nothing not to like there other than maybe the touch high price, but I can live with that because it's a great whiskey. Alternatively, if you can't find it, GlenAllachie 18-year-old. The latest batches of this have been great. I've tried a few samples as the batches have progressed, and it's a solid alternative. It's about $200 in Alberta, about $230 in BC, so bang on with the GlenDronach 18, and it's made by the aforementioned Billy Walker himself. Again, the most recent batches are getting darker and darker as Billy Walker's had more time to move these whiskeys to more active casks. Again, it's kind of a new school sherry sweet fruit sherry bomb. Lots of chocolate, raisin, prune, all those really strong flavors that you're looking for in a sherried whiskey, which is what I think we're getting from Dalmore 18 by the look of all the color, but it's not really. Alternatively, if you wanted to go bougie with this and just, I don't know, spend a little more than half of what you're spending on the Dalmore 18-year-old, I would say, if you can find it, the GlenDronach 21-year-old Parliament. Now, the most recent batches of this are still overaged stock. Again, this is a whiskey from 2019, which is actually 24 years old because they had a closure where the distillery was not running for a time period. So this is actually older whiskey than what's on the label. Yes, it's expensive at about probably $300 Canadian a bottle now, if you can find it. But it's 48% alcohol. It's a combination of Oloroso and PX sherry casks. And it's the value proposition, again, compared to the Dalmore, there's no comparison. Now, I have another alternative that is a lot cheaper to the Dalmore 18, but I'm saving that for my number one whiskey on this list. So if you do not like these alternatives, I have a less expensive one that I think, again, is a great performing bottle. Number 3 on this list is a whiskey that's actually quite close to my heart because I've really enjoyed it in the past. And again, this list isn't about bad whiskeys. This is about whiskeys that are being sold at price points that are just out of touch with reality. And sadly, as a whiskey that I've enjoyed past editions of, I don't think I'll ever be purchasing it again because it's just too expensive. And they didn't have to go this route because they've actually increased this whiskey $150 from its previous price point, and it all jumped at one time. It went $150 in one single leap. And that's the Highland Park 18-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey from Orkney. It's 43% alcohol. It's natural color as far as I know, and it is chill filtered. This is entirely first fill sherry seasoned oak casks, and it's a really lovely, like lightly peated profile that, again, I really enjoy. But it went from about $200 to $230 Canadian up to $350 Canadian. Again, at our cheapest retailer here in BC. And I've seen this price increase mirrored in Alberta as well. Again, they're typically the lowest price market in Canada for whiskey. That means after tax in BC, this bottle's gonna run me $402.50, over $400. That's reprehensible. That is bad. And I guess they could have tried to justify the increase by, I don't know, increasing the quality of this bottling, maybe putting it at 46% alcohol or higher, making sure that it's not chill filtered, and again, keeping it that natural color. But they haven't. So there's no excuse for this $150 price jump. And I'm not saying I'm not being understanding. I know there's price increases with logistics, with bottling costs, with barley costs because of the war in Ukraine. I get it. But $150 is a ridiculous price increase. My number one alternative to Highland Park 18 is not very specific. I'm sorry. But it is independently bottled Highland Park secret Orkneys, unnamed Orkneys, because Scapa so rarely had independent bottlings. Most of them are quite old now, or fairly obvious if they're out there. You can get independently bottled Highland Park for a really good price proposition, and at older age statements than the 18-year-old for less money. And this is starting to change. People have caught on to this trend, and so they are going up in price, but not at the same $150 price jump as the official bottling 18-year-old. And so this is only an example, and this isn't even a great quality example, but this is the 80 Rattray cask Orkney 18-year-old. Now, this is entirely ex-bourbon cask aged Highland Park, independently bottled Highland Park. It's secret Orkney, but it's Highland Park. So 46% alcohol, non-chill filtered, natural color, 18 years old, the same age statement. I got this for $80 on sale. And again, there are better than this at cask strength with higher age statements, again, for less than the old price of the Highland Park 18. So watch out for secret Orkneys, unnamed Orkneys, independently bottled Highland Parks. They're a great option. Now let me give you an official bottling option as another alternative. A more specific alternative to independently bottled Highland Park would be the Ben Romick 15-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey. Now this goes for about $130 Canadian or less if it's on sale. It is 43% alcohol, so the same ABV as that Highland Park 18-year-old. It's chill filtered as far as I know, but it is natural color, and it's entirely first fill ex-bourbon or first fill sherry casks. Now this whiskey, yes, it's 3 years younger than that Highland Park 18-year-old, but it can be had on sale for less than 1/3 the actual price of that Highland Park 18. So you can get 3 bottles of this when it's on sale for the same price as that Highland Park 18. The tasting notes are very similar to the Highland Park 18 in my experience. I just cracked this bottle to double check that. This is not my first bottle, the Ben Romick 15-year-old, but it's like dried fruits, grilled bacon, like a light, lovely peat smoke, some citrus, some tobacco, some leather, some oak, chocolate, spice. It's a really lovely whiskey. And again, you're saving a ton of money. You could go out and explore an independent bottled secret Orkney while also getting a bottle of this and still be saving money. It just makes sense to me. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Number 2 on my list is a whiskey with a really cool, historic, but yet kind of ridiculous name. And it is not a Scotch whiskey. It's the first one on this list that's not Scotch. It is actually a 20-year-old Canadian whiskey that's been independently bottled or sourced, I guess, by an American company, bottled, and then sold under its own name. And I haven't actually tried this whiskey, so I have to be really careful here not to slag it too much, because it could be the most delicious whiskey I've ever tasted in my life. This could be the nectar of the gods that once it touches my lips and tongue, I achieve enlightenment and everything is right in the world. However, I'm guessing that's not the case. I'm talking about the Chicken Cock 20-year-old Canadian rye whiskey, which it retails for about $700 Canadian. And I thought Whistle Pig was expensive, which is also Canadian whiskey, if you're not aware. Wow. Okay. So let's dig into this a little bit more. So it's 50% ABV, which is a really great drinking strength. So great job there, guys. It's 90% rye, 10% malted barley, which is actually, sounds like a delicious mash bill. So again, great job there. It's sourced Canadian whiskey, as I mentioned, bottled in the United States, and then bottled under this label that has, again, a lot of history under its name from Prohibition times. It's just a little bit funny to say. Now, they lose me at this value proposition. $700 Canadian. I hate to be a bit dramatic, but my mind is just spinning with all the things I could buy instead of this whiskey for $700 Canadian. Again, haven't had it, so if you guys have had it, let me know. Is it worth the $700 Canadian? It's actually, I've seen it as high as $735 Canadian. In the United States, I believe it goes for about $500 US. I don't know, guys. For the sake of your wallet, maybe hands off the chicken cock. Let's see if we can turn those frowns upside down. Let's turn to the positives here. Let's look at the alternatives to this $700 Canadian whiskey. Now, what if I said to you, considering to spend $700 on this whiskey, that you could get another Canadian whiskey that's 25 years older, and it will cost you $250 less? Yes, Canadian Club has their Chronicles series, and the latest edition of the Chronicles series is a 45-year-old Canadian whiskey. And it runs for about $450 Canadian, almost across the board in Canada at least. 45 years old is a tremendously old whiskey, and really at $10 a year, it's actually a pretty decent price point. However, say you don't want to spend $450. I got something for you. If you want to shave off just 1 year off that total, Canadian Club Chronicles 44-year-old whiskey can still be had, I think in most provinces, at least in BC, in Alberta, I think some others, for about $256 Canadian. 44 years, $256. That's $450 roughly less than the chicken cock. Now, these are corn whiskeys. They are not rye whiskeys. And I could see how that would be a problem for somebody. It's a very different flavor profile, and I do prefer the rye profile to the corn whiskey profile myself. And also, the Canadian Club Chronicles series, I believe outside of the 40-year-old, does still use the 1/11th rule where they can add other things to the whiskey that aren't whiskey. Fair enough. So you want a rye, and you want it at 20 years old. Well, there is a distillery in Alberta Distillers, behind Alberta Premium. They have a 20-year-old rye whiskey that is 100% rye. It's 42% ABV. It's $90 Canadian. Alberta Distillers is basically the MGP of the North. They are the suppliers for a lot of the Whistle Pig rye products that come back to us at outrageous price points. But I get it. It's 42% alcohol. It's not quite that 50% alcohol that you have on that chicken cock. All right, we can take care of that. How about we go with a cask strength 100% rye whiskey that has had some plaudits from someone declaring it the best whiskey in the world. Now, I don't agree with that judgment. However, it's a very good rye whiskey. It's something I've gone through a bottle of, and I've had a few different samples of batches. The last batch was 63.5% alcohol, so that will fix your lack of ABV on that 20-year-old. I'm talking about the Alberta Premium Cask Strength Rye. Again, 100% rye. It runs about $72 Canadian, actually $67 Canadian on sale at BC liquor store right now, I believe. So $67 to $75 Canadian. It's won some silly plaudits, but this is $630 cheaper. How about this? You can go ahead and get the Canadian Club Chronicles 44-year-old. You can go ahead and buy that 20-year-old Alberta Premium Rye, and you can get that cask strength Alberta Premium Rye for $300 less than that single bottle of chicken cock 20-year-old Canadian rye whiskey. This is ridiculous. I'm moving on. Before I get to number one on this list, I wanted to just go ahead and thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoy it, please go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. It really helps. And comment down below. First off, I wanted to do this video just because brands have kind of taken their customers for granted, some brands anyway, and I don't want them fleecing the ordinary whiskey consumer, which is why I wanted to give alternatives to these whiskeys. And this is talking about MSRP run amok to astronomical proportions in some occasions. So I wanted to know, number one, if you guys actually do enjoy this video. If you do, let me know if you want to see more lists like this. I got plenty of additional ones I cut from this list. There's a lot of options out there, and there's thankfully a lot of alternatives. There's a lot of good whiskeys. If something is out of reach and out of price, we have bottles that we can turn to. Also, let me know if you have any overpriced whiskeys that you have alternatives to, or if you have a different alternative to something that was on my list. Let's get to number one. There was a time when number one on my list was at the top of the heap when it came to single malt Scotch whiskeys. It was the whiskey that every enthusiast, every whiskey botherer, every whiskey connoisseur had to have on their shelf and in their glass. And I don't think that's the case anymore. It still has a tremendous reputation, but just not amongst the core whiskey geeks, let's say. I think that it's lost its reputation in part due to high price, and also in part due to the fact that I don't think the whiskey is treated the way that it was in the past. So I'm talking about the Macallan 18-year-old, and in this case, the double cask, single malt Scotch whiskey. Now, the double cask was a little bit cheaper than the sherry cask, so I thought I'd cut Macallan a break and go with the more cost-friendly alternative here. It's 43% ABV. It is natural color. Yay, we've got a point there. But it is still chill filtered. It uses seasoned American and European oak sherry casks, and Macallan prides themselves on the quality of their casks. However, this bottle will cost you in British Columbia $550 Canadian. But that's before the 15% tax. It'll cost you $632.50 Canadian. Oh, sorry, the deposit, 60 cents Canadian, for an 18-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey that isn't even 46% natural color, non-chill filtered. It's not cask strength. It's nothing stupendous. It's not a particular vintage. I don't understand the price point on this whiskey. This is the archetypal lifestyle whiskey that's priced for the rich and the famous after making its reputation by being heralded by whiskey lovers all around the world for being top notch, which it was, and it's still a good whiskey. It's not a bad whiskey, but I think they've lost the thread when it comes to the price. It's a perversion of the reason that it exists. It doesn't exist to sit on a shelf in some office looking pretty. It exists to be enjoyed, and this was the single malt Scotch whiskey you needed to have on your shelf. And now it's the single malt Scotch whiskey that you need to have on your shelf to know that you've made it in life, that you've arrived as someone with more money than sense or taste. This is what Dalmore 18 aspires to be. And the copycats to this model prove that the premiumization model of this whiskey exists. It worked. It worked so far. Let's hope the proof of concept that is the Macallan 18 at this price, still selling, let's hope that others don't adopt it, don't keep going for it like Dalmore has. Perhaps Macallan in the future can regain its bearing and its price, plot a more true course, and really get focused on good old-fashioned, great drinking whiskey at a reasonable price. But I think they're still kind of dedicated to high society virtue signaling, which is a shame. All right, I want to talk about something positive. My number one alternative for the Macallan 18-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey is a single malt from the La Cranza distillery from Isle of Arran Distillers. It is the Arran 18-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey. Now, this is the new bottling style, the one that has the braille really thoughtfully included on the label. Good job there, guys. And this bottle has all the geeky stats that we love to see as whiskey botherers, to use a aquavitaism. It's 46% ABV. It's non-chill filtered. It's natural colored. They use first and second fill ex-sherry casks, to my knowledge. And this bottle, if you're purchasing in Alberta, which people have caught on to this, so it does sell out fast, but it's not like Springbank fast. You can get it when it comes into stock. It is about $140 to $155 Canadian. Now, even if you can't get it in Alberta, in BC, it's much more expensive, but still about 1/3 of the price of the Macallan. Maybe a little bit more than that. $220 Canadian in BC. The highest I've seen it is maybe $250, but down the street I can get for $253 after tax, to be fair, because we've been talking about after tax. Half the price of the Macallan 18-year-old. I think it does a tremendous job of bringing value for money and a great flavor and taste experience. Comparing tasting notes between the Macallan 18 and the Arran 18, there are many similarities, and Arran only opened in 1995. They're doing a great job for a relative newcomer. It's rich, fruity, it's soaked in sherry, raisins, dark fruits, dark chocolate, figs. Some citrus notes pop through there from the distillate character too. Christmas cake, leather, tobacco. It's a really enjoyable whiskey. I went through an entire bottle of this last fall. It's a bottle I brought with me on a trip to Nova Scotia, and it was delicious. I had to finish the bottle before coming home. It's a perfect stand-in as well, as I mentioned earlier, for the Dalmore 18-year-old, but I didn't want to use it twice. I wanted to give you guys more options, not less. More choice to go out there and find what you really love and hopefully save a few bucks while doing it. Guys, thank you once again for joining me. Like I said earlier, like, share, subscribe, all those YouTube things. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you join me for the next video from the West Coast. Slange.